Welcome to the Prosper Project, the show that helps entrepreneurs build brands that impact the world and the bottom line. We know that success doesn't come in a one-size-fits-all package. That's why we're bringing you adaptable marketing strategies along with valuable insights from inspiring changemakers, firebrands, and visionaries. I'm Lorraine Sugart, founder of the disruptive brand agency Prosper for Purpose. Now for this week's episode. Hi, everyone, and welcome back to this week's episode of the Prosper Project. Today, my guest is someone I've known for a few years, Tara Milburn. Tara is a leader focused on using the power of business to address some of our biggest global challenges. She's been part of the startup ecosystem since the early 90s, and she's had some non-traditional beginnings. So she was part of a team that privately funded an arena for the NHL Vancouver Canucks, the first international expansion with the NBA, and the 2010 Olympic Winter Games domestic bid. With 30 years in business, Tara is leading by example to demonstrate that caring and profitability can go hand in hand. Tara is the founder and CEO of Ethical Swag, a company that provides to organizations swag that they can use for employees, clients, and beyond. So join me in welcoming Tara. Tara, how are you?
I'm awesome. Thanks, Lorraine.
Thanks. Well, you and I met, I think, back in 2021, and we worked together for a while. So Tara is a former client of mine, and she has a big, bold vision. But a lot's happened since 2021 when you and I were working together, and we're going to dig into that in a minute. But first of all, why Ethical Swag? How did your idea for this company come about?
So yeah, I don't come from a promotional products background. I like to say that I did not wake up one day with a burning desire to put logos on pens. It's nothing like that. I just always knew that I wanted to start a business that really addressed some of the opportunities and the defaults of business that I've witnessed and experienced throughout my career. And so I didn't know what the business was going to be. That was the biggest challenge, to be completely honest. I wasn't going to invent the next best widget, not my skill set. And so I just knew that I had fuel in the tank and I needed to create a business. I just didn't know what it was. And when I saw this particular industry, I recognized a gap in the market. And I realized that it was a very large industry, 25 billion annually in North America alone. And I felt that I've worked in sponsorship, for example, like when I was working in professional sports, I was working in the sponsorship world. And the foundation of sponsorship is brands wanting to associate with each other because they both exemplify the same sort of values or the same messaging. And so what I discovered with this particular industry, I kind of saw it through a sponsorship lens. And I looked at swag as a partner of a brand, and I was like, they're putting their logos on products that don't represent their brand. Yeah. And it would be akin to sponsoring events that didn't necessarily represent what you stood for as a brand. So I saw some similarities from my history. I saw opportunities within the market, and I came up with the name Ethical Swag and started, and it's been really interesting. It's been really, really interesting.
Yeah. So what year did you actually launch?
Well, geez, everything has a story with me. Nothing's straightforward. There's no
Well, that's what we're here. We're here to tell the stories.
So I had come up with the idea back in 2010. I incorporated the business. I came up with the name. And it was never intended to actually be a full-time hustle. It was more sort of something off to the side. Where I live, I have two daughters, and there are not a lot of women in business that are doing sort of global business. There's absolutely professional women. There's, the accountants and the lawyers and the doctors and that sort of thing. But my girls could not understand what I was doing from a business perspective. When they were younger, they thought I sat at a computer and just typed all day, and they thought it was super boring and, all that sort of thing. And there was no one, it's hard to be what you can't see. And so It was very difficult for me to kind of explain to them, because where we live, there really isn't a lot of women-led businesses, to be completely frank.
And tell everyone where you are.
I'm in the middle of a UNESCO Biosphere Reserve, dangling off in the North Atlantic in Cape Breton Island, Nova Scotia. So it's relatively remote
and incredibly beautiful.
Oh, incredibly beautiful. Rated the #1 island by National Geographic in North America. And I'm right now speaking to you from the Bredor Lakes, which is, I had a swim this morning. Oh yeah, every morning I start my day diving into the water, and I may or may not see a seal. I see eagles. There's a family of ducks that go by, and that's how I start every day. It's pretty amazing.
Oh my gosh,
we're
that's
very,
amazing.
very lucky.
Yeah, that's great. Well, you're in an environment that probably fosters your creativity. And I love that your girls didn't get what you did, because my girls thought the same thing about me, both when I was employed and when I started my business. But then over time, when they got old enough to kind of understand, you start having those conversations with them. And it's really interesting, isn't it?
Yeah. And it still took them a long time to figure out. Honestly, it's been largely misunderstood what I'm trying to do. I'm not, that's amongst my business colleagues. I honestly had colleagues and friends say, "Do you need a job?" Like when yeah, they really didn't understand what I was trying to do. And thankfully, it wasn't off-putting to me, because I was like, it was hard to understand. And I didn't go out and promote. I spent a lot of time at the beginning, and not back in 2020. Back in 2010, I kept my beautiful corporate job that paid the mortgage, and I just did it off to the side. It wasn't until later, it was 2017, the fall of 2017, when I decided to put my full-time focus into ethical swag.
So 7 years, it was a side hustle.
Well, hustle's a strong word. I didn't hustle. I did not hustle. I had a website and never did anything. It was just sort of there. Part of it was I never wanted it to be perceived that I was using my corporate position, because I was working for a government crown corporation. So I didn't want anyone to think that I was using my connections and my position to drive business personally.
Okay.
And so I just left it off to the side. And hindsight being 2020, it was amazing. And we can unpack that if you want, but it really did just sort of sit there for 7 years until I finally gave it my full-time focus. And I think that's a big lesson too. Like,
right.
If you do something only a little bit, you only get a little bit back.
That's right. We get out what we put in. So that's really interesting. I also think sometimes entrepreneurs, probably not you, but a lot of people think, if I build it, they will come, right? I'll just throw this website out there. We'll see what happens. And then maybe it'll be worth going all in on. But you didn't really do that. You just, were kind of waiting for the right moment, I think.
Well, and I didn't even know if it was going to be that business, to be completely frank, because I didn't know that I wanted to put logos on pens, to be completely frank. And I didn't want to sell swag. I don't think selling more stuff is the answer. And so it's kind of interesting. But really what I arrived at was, I'm not trying to sell more stuff. It's a $25 billion industry. I'm trying to provide alternatives within an established industry that already has people buying the stuff, and we are an alternative. And so there's a real difference there between trying to sell stuff versus providing alternatives.
Yeah, I think that's really an important point to underscore, that people were already buying the things, but you gave them the opportunity to shift those desires to align with a company that shared their values. And so, how can I provide swag for my clients more ethically and sustainably? And that's kind of what led you to go all in on ethical swag. And can you kind of walk us through what that journey looked like from 2020 over the last few years? And before we started recording this podcast, we were talking about, what does normal look like? Because it's been such a volatile 3+ years. But what did 2020 and 2021 look like for you?
Yeah, it's been a ride. Let me tell you, it's been a ride, because I came into the industry not really knowing a lot, and then had to do a lot of research, a lot of digging, a lot of, how are we going to do this? How are we going to let people know about us, but not try and sell stuff? But I'm very much a capitalist. I love profit. I think the corporate system is a pretty cool one. I love it. I was looking to build a different kind of corporation. So I don't shy away from profit. I don't shy away from sales, but it's not sort of expense or growth at all costs.
Right.
It's how do we build a sustainable business that embodies the things that I felt were really important? So I spent a lot of time when I decided in 2017 that I was going to go all in on this. It was the fall of 2017. And I had a lot of people wondering if I had really hit my head hard because they didn't know what I was doing, because I was very internal with it. Like I was really being thoughtful about who we are and what we are. And in 2018, I launched. I figured out our business model. I figured out what and who we were. I figured out a lot of the pieces that are required. And really, it's all, from my perspective, we allow our customers to tell a story about who they are and what they stand for through the products that bear their logo. And it is really very much storytelling. So it was exciting. And I was so, loving every minute of it. And then COVID hit. It was like, oh, brakes on.
Right.
What do you do? Like, we all went through it. We all did.
Right. We all did.
And I really looked at it. We were very, very lucky. I had enough experience at that stage because it was 2018. So it was about 2 years that I had been doing it and learning and all in. And so I had data and we were growing. Once I decided to go all in, it was like, oh, whoa, okay. Like we got some traction quickly. But then 2020, it was a bit of a pause, early 2020, which was kind of nice because it allowed me to look at the data and to look at the journey over the last 2 years without the huge overhead that a lot of companies had.
Yeah.
So it was a really interesting time for us because I feel like it was a real sweet spot. We were ahead of the curve as it related to sustainability. We had become a B Corp, a certified B Corp, just at the beginning of the pandemic, which was very good timing for us. We had enough data from the previous 2 years that allowed us to really dig in and understand who our customer was and what was important to them, because we actually hadn't done any marketing. All of our customers to date had found us.
That's pretty incredible.
100%. So it was really interesting because they were champions of our brand and we were able to talk to them and say, what brought you to us and what do you like about us? And we were able to have those conversations because all of a sudden they had time. Everybody was sitting in their living rooms. So I actually look at those early days of COVID as a very huge, it was just serendipitous for us, quite frankly, because we're early enough that we didn't have really high overhead, but we were far enough along the journey that we had customers, we had advocates, we had champions, and we could really dig in and understand their buying journey and their pain points, and we doubled down on those.
Yeah.
And because of that, I think we've experienced exceptional growth.
Talk a little bit about that growth. You were telling me before that you grew by leaps and bounds from 2020 to 2021 and so on. What do you attribute that to? And then what kind of havoc did that kind of create within the business? Because we know that growing too slow is a problem, but growing too fast brings its own issues. So what do you attribute the growth to, do you think? Did you kind of hit a tipping point at some point?
I'd love to say I know. I've got a lot of theories. I do think that there was a lot of strategy and there was a lot of luck. And I'd love to say that I know exactly what the answers are, but I don't know. I do think that we were a certified B Corp in a very large industry where there wasn't a lot of certified B Corps. We were an e-commerce based company with a remote first. I built it as a remote first company, not just because of COVID, but because I felt that I wanted to be able to hire talent for their ability and not their location.
Yes.
So every single decision I made in 2017, when I was starting this, like when I decided to be full-time at this business, I did every decision based on remote first. Although remote first, I don't even think that term existed in 2017. It's just, I knew that that was the kind of business I wanted to grow and build. And so I had made a lot of very strategic decisions, not knowing COVID was coming, that positioned us exceptionally well for COVID. Not the least of which, the world saw what drastic change we can see in a very short period of time when we stop doing the things that we do to pollute our world.
Yes.
So it was the remote first, it was decision making beforehand, it was the certified B Corp, it was the global awareness around sustainability, that sort of that spotlight that happened. I could go on and on.
Preparation meets opportunity.
Honestly, yeah, I think so. It was, a lot of people within our industry are, I'll use the term like a marketing agency. So an organization will go to a promotional products distributor and say, okay, give us some ideas and that sort of thing. Like,
yeah,
what do you recommend for this promotion or that sort of thing? It's very much sort of like an agency. And what I saw was it was hard to find and buy sustainable swag. So yes, I think leading with product is really important, but there was people on the internet saying, I want to do better, but how do I know better? And how do I find the products? And so I made the decision back in 2017, okay, I'm going to be fully e-commerce. And I'm going to have a level of transparency on how we source our products. And we're going to meet our customer where they are with a good, better, best rating. So that if your price point didn't allow you to get best in class, making sure that the good product is socially compliant from a manufacturing standpoint and that sort of thing. So these are all the decisions I made in 2017 that really did sort of differentiate us and set us up for I think what happened.
Yeah, and you built your brand around that. So it all comes back to brand. It all comes back to how you position yourself in the market, how people find you, if your brand promise, in your case of being sourcing and providing ethical products, actually is what your customers experience. And it just all came together for you. So I really do believe that it is preparation meeting opportunity. I think that both are at play in virtually every success. And I love that. That's how the company has evolved. And okay, so now talk a little bit about some of the things that you learned as you scaled very quickly.
It was stressful.
Yeah.
I went from at the beginning of 2020 when COVID first hit going, oh my goodness, where are sales going to come from? And do we even have a company? To then being really worried about the people that work with me. Because it became so busy. Like if somebody was off for a day, it was terrifying because we didn't want to drop any balls and everybody was right against the wall working constantly, which is not the kind of company I wanted to build.
Exactly.
So I was torn so much because you need business, you need the sales in order to pay the salaries and all those kinds of things. So you have to do that. But we were growing so fast that we weren't able to fill in the infrastructure at the back end to make sure that there was those support systems in place to make sure that people weren't getting burnt out and that sort of thing. So it was a real conflict for me because it's the push-pull, right? And it was very, very, very difficult. And I've been so lucky to have an amazing team. And as we've grown, we've had an amazing team. That hasn't been easy either, but certainly they see our vision and it's been hard. I'm not going to lie. It's hard. I worry about them all the time.
Yeah, but I love that you're being honest about it because in business, very few, at least in my experience, very few business owners want to talk about how hard it can be. And that we fail forward in the best of circumstances, right? We're learning as we're growing. And it's really easy to look back and say, I do this differently. But when you're in the moment, you're really trying to keep your head above water in a good way. And we look at this as, oh, it's a good problem to have. But you were, again, very prepared as much as you could have been and able to kind of ride out that temporary storm. But a lot of companies who aren't as well prepared and as well equipped or don't have the culture that you created, which is also part of your brand, they wouldn't have been able to ride that storm out. So I think that's really telling. What were some of the steps that you did take to alleviate some of the pressure on your team? Probably hiring was one, hiring more people. But are there other things that you would advise people who start growing quickly to consider?
Well, we turned business away, right? So we went from, okay, how are we going to make sure that we've got enough business to keep the lights on?
Yeah.
To, okay, say no. And it was shocking, really, to go from, oh, great, look at how busy we are, to, okay, now we have to say no. But we could have kept saying yes and we would have burnt out the team, which we were at risk of doing. But also, very importantly, from my perspective, was I'd much rather say no to business than to make a bunch of mistakes and upset the customer.
Yeah.
And so I just felt as though we had to really evaluate what our capacity was to make sure we could deliver what we said we were going to take on. So we did a few things. We extended delivery times so that we weren't always in a, oh my gosh, this proof has to get approved today or they're not going to hit their delivery date of X date. Do you know what I mean? It's all mass customization. You're customizing all these different products and you've got virtual proofs and you've got artwork and you've got all that sort of thing. And so let's, for example, say the average production time is 15 days. And let's say somebody was so busy today that they didn't get a proof over to you to prove.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden you lose a day or two, all of a sudden you're going to miss your delivery date. And we've let the customer down and all that sort of, so we extended our dates to allow a little bit of wiggle room, right?
Yeah.
So that it wasn't as, we turned customers down. If they needed a tight delivery time, we just said no. And a lot of it, we could have done it. Today we could do it.
Right.
But a year ago, I just said, say no.
But your reputation matters. Yeah, right. And if you take something on thinking maybe we can make this happen, or if we really push it and you're already having a team where you can't afford to have anyone get sick, we were still dealing with a lot of things related to COVID and other things after being kind of wrapped up at home for a long time. Everyone was more susceptible to other things. So you preserved your reputation by under promising and over delivering, which is a lot better than the alternative, it sounds like.
Well, it was a very unsettling time for our supply chain. So us saying we could do something and then turning around and our suppliers going, oh, oops, sorry.
Right.
Because they had last year, like it feels like 10 years ago, but they had staffing issues. They had to, these suppliers had to lay a lot of people off. They had to bring a lot of people back. They had new staff that didn't know what they were doing. There was mistakes happening, which is reflection on us. And then there was surge pricing for shipping, and there was bottlenecks in the supply chain, and there was so many macro things outside of our control that we had to lean into what we could control. And what we could control was keeping our sanity. What we could control was protecting as best we could the mental health of our staff.
Yeah.
And what we could control was our transparency with our customers. So we did make sure, did we get it right all the time? No.
Nobody ever does, though. Nobody ever does.
But we come clean. We stand behind what we do. We make refunds when something goes sideways, those kinds of things. We just really stood strong with our brand and what we stood for.
And you have great products, but tell our listeners a little bit about who you work with. What size companies do you work with? If someone's interested in products, because you have incredible products on your site, and your website looks fabulous, by the way. And so tell us who you work with, companies that order a certain amount of products or a certain size. Do you do event products? I already know the answers to some of these questions, or at least I did a couple of years ago, but for our listeners, tell them a little bit about the clients that you work with.
So our clients are, it's very varied. A lot of universities, a lot of not-for-profits, a lot of very large tech companies, and we have really done no marketing to date. So I would say 90% of our business is companies coming through our door. So we're a preferred supplier for Microsoft. They came to us and said, we'd like to get you as one of our preferred suppliers, because their procurement department was tasked with finding suppliers that met certain criteria around sustainability. And they did their research and they came to us, because trying to get into Microsoft, I haven't tried it, but I can't even imagine.
Much better to have them come to you.
Right?
Yeah.
So we had an internal champion at Microsoft that held our hand to become a preferred supplier, because we met the criteria of their procurement department, because they said, this is important. And it's been great. We've had Google, we've had Stripe, we've had Shopify, we've had all the big brands, but we also have smaller companies, which is really interesting to me. And it speaks to our culture. Because when I first looked at this industry and what business model I was going to deploy and where the gaps were within the market, I recognized that we needed to make sustainable promotional products accessible, and which is hard. Because if you sell 1,000 pens and you sell 10,000 pens, it's the exact same amount of work, but your profit is way higher on 10,000 pens.
Absolutely.
So many people within this industry are going for those big orders. But at our core, it's around accessibility and transparency. So I even have our team member remind me, because sometimes I'm like, okay, maybe we just have to have a minimum threshold for orders, because we're putting an awful lot of effort into some of these orders that are only amounting to $800 or something like that. And I've had team members say, but you've told us that we're trying to make this accessible. And I'm like, you're absolutely right. And so it's like this fine balance all the time.
Good culture to have them helping hold you accountable and reminding you as well. I love that.
I love it. Because then what the team does then is they come up with solutions to make it easier for the accessibility, rather than putting a threshold to say, no, nothing below this is where, so they then put their problem solving caps on and they say, okay, how do we make this so that we are able to do the smaller orders as efficiently as possible?
So is there an order too small? So if someone's listening and they're like, hey, I'm doing an event for 50 people, or I want to stock for my company some client swag that I send out as I get a new client, and I could probably do, I don't know, 100 or 250. Is there there has to be some minimum. Obviously, you're not going to print 10 pens or something like that. How do you kind of distinguish what the entry point is to at least be able to make profit? Because you are a business, so you have to take on things that can still be profitable to the company, obviously.
Absolutely. And so if we go back to this sort of accessibility pillar that we talk about, you can find all that on our website. We have minimum order quantity for absolutely every product.
Right there.
It's right there. So
I love it.
One of the ways in which we empower our customers is you go to our website and you can go and you can see what the minimum order quantity is, and you can say, okay, I want 50 of them. And if you put in 50 for that particular product, it's a dynamic pricing. So it will roll in the cost of the setup and the cost of the run charges and everything, and say, okay, per unit, that pen is going to be this much.
Yeah.
Or it's all on our website. You can see what the minimum order quantity is. You can put in the quantities that you're interested in. You can pick your decoration. So is it one color, two color? Is it embroidery? That sort of thing. And all that pricing will kind of pop up for you. What we haven't estimated for you, you still have to work with one of our customer service reps, because depending on how much and where it's going, there's a freight charge that's going to go in there. So we have to round that out. We'll do a virtual proof for you and everything else, so that when you sign off on your order, you know exactly what it looks like, you know what the costs are, you know exactly when you're going to expect it, all those kinds of things. But yeah, the website we've tried to design it as much as possible to hold your hand as much as possible.
That's wonderful. I think that's wonderful. So what is next for Ethical Swag? What do you see the next few years looking like? Do you have any big aspirations, or is there anything on the horizon that you want to talk about? Or are you just really happy with sustaining and building on the growth that you have?
So I guess I'll answer that in two ways. Ethical Swag is poised for growth. We're very, very excited. We've got a fabulous team. We've built out tech in the background so that we can sort of grow this. And we're very excited about what the future will hold at Ethical Swag. For me, I really see it as a platform to say that there's a different way to grow business. I feel that I've been in business for over 30 years now. I've seen a lot of great things, and I've seen a lot of not so great things. But one of the things I've really noticed in recent years, the time cycles of when people expect everything to happen is very short.
Yes. Yes. Instant gratification. Wait, I ordered that yesterday. Why isn't it here?
So there's this expectation that everything is fast, including the growth of your business. There's this idea that, oh, well, you grow a business, get out quick before you lose your money kind of mentality.
Yeah.
Like, We used to have brands that lasted 100 years.
Mm-hmm.
And people are being celebrated for building a brand for 3 years and sucking $20 million out and going off and doing something else and not worrying about the fact that, well, if you ended up with $20 million, you took somebody's money from that. Like somebody lost if you gained. And it's become normalized and okay to have massive failure. And there's nothing wrong with, businesses fail. I'm not suggesting that.
Right.
But it's that shortened time period and that short window of do it fast, make a bunch of money, get out. I see it in the incubators. I see it in the startups. I see it in the whole sort of mindset of business. And I think that from my perspective, so Ethical Swag, poised for growth, we've got a really strong foundation. We have a fabulous team. From my perspective, I'd really like to dig in around what role business can take in sort of the next iteration of fixing some of our global challenges, because business creates a lot of the problems we have, but it's also going to be the solution. And it's not bad business, and it can be for profit. And that's really where my heart lies.
I love that. That's great. So that is your company, and that sounds amazing. And now I want to ask you the question that I always ask my guests. This is the Prosper Project. So what does it mean for you personally to prosper?
So for me, I don't want a lot, but so my father was an entrepreneur and he went bankrupt when I was 10. And he woke up the next day and he went right back in and he started again. And he did well, not Jeff Bezos well, not, he was able to provide for his family and make sure he's now he passed in 2015. He'd be 98 now. Wow. He was never greedy. He came from poverty that none of us could really understand, like no shoes, no food. He was Irish, dirt floor house, 1-room house. And he never, ever wanted more than what he needed for his safety and his family's safety. I've had a very successful career. I don't have to do what I'm doing right now. I could be playing golf. But I just feel like if all of us took what we had and added 10% to benefit other people's lives. So my father came from nothing and put me in a position where I've been very fortunate in my life. Mm-hmm. And I want to take that and add a little bit. And if everybody takes what they've got and adds a little bit for somebody else, think about the impacts that could have. And so for me, how can I impact other people's lives? Because it's not really, for me, business is the conduit, but how do I make Liz's life, who works with us in Nairobi, better? Nothing made me happier than when she put in our group chat one morning a picture of her son going to boarding school. And I looked at my husband and I said, because we employ her and we pay her a good wage, that is something she's able to do. And we're affecting the life of her family and her son in a very small way. But a lot of little small things can have massive impact over time. And if all of us just said, okay, I don't have to be the next massive success, but if I can just do 10% more, and everybody did that, 2% more, if we can improve somebody else's life just a little bit, if that's sort of what gets you out of bed in the morning, think of the impact that could have.
I love that. Tara Milburn, thanks so much for being my guest today on the Prosper Project. It's been great catching up with you.
I really appreciate the time.
Thank you so much for tuning into this episode of the Prosper Project. If you want to grow a peerless, profitable brand, please hit the subscribe button so you never miss an episode. And if you find value in our show, please help us reach others by sharing an episode and leaving a review. In appreciation, please visit prosperforpurpose.com for more free resources to help you grow your business.